Thank you for being here this Sunday morning. It's always good to be with you, and I appreciate your presence and honor your commitment to this place and these ideals of religious tolerance and liberty. I know there are other things you could be doing these mornings, so I appreciate your choice to be here, to be with others whose values mirror yours, and who appreciate and understand it's not necessary that we think alike to love alike. And there's a food truck. I haven't mentioned it. I hope that you'll go and purchase something from them. Additionally, from what I hear and from what I have experienced, there's also been a lot of illness in our families over the holidays. In fact, I'm not feeling well today. This is the time of year, it seems, that we are sick. Gail and I have been sick. And if you have been touched with illness, I hope it has passed you over, that you're now better than you were before. Because being sick sucks. But sometimes we know how good it feels to be alive after we have been ill. I'm reminded that I received a card over the holidays. It was from a beautiful family celebrating this time of year, the recent holidays, perhaps the time of year when Santa Claus comes and when good things seem to occur. There were pictures of the young ones, the children, two little girls who were doing what they love to do, perhaps more than anything else besides loving their parents. One of the pictures showed one of the girls dancing with wild abandon, her hair cascading around her as she moved to the rhythm of the music she heard. The other girl was singing, and the picture showed a young person who was very earnest in her love for what she was doing. In her singing, she was offering the world something better than its regular mundane experience. She was offering the world her voice, her dedication to the truth that comes when you lay it all out there for others. They both appear to be doing a very fine job in the singing and dancing. But what was, for me, the most lively, or the most lovely, is that neither of these girls seem to be the least inhibited by how they might be judged by their performance. They performed unabashedly, with little concern, I think, of how others might judge their performance. It was, I must say, a beautiful portrait of the family and of that family's love. It's difficult, I think, for most of us to do what these little girls were doing, to do what we want to do, perhaps what we are called to do, with little care of what others might think. These little girls had an innocence that many of us have lost. They have the possibilities of the world and their lives before them, while many of us have determined that the world is cold and that our best days may very well be behind us. It's a harsh reality that we rarely dare speak of, because the truth of it frightens us so. How is it that we lose these childlike qualities? Why is it that After we get older, we dispose of the ability, the nerve, to sing like nobody's listening and to dance like nobody's watching. I think it's because not too long after we learn to sing and dance, we also learn to criticize. There are some people who no doubt dance better than others. Some people undoubtedly are able to sing better than are others. That's the real world, I think, isn't it? Some people have more talent in some areas than others. But we also learn to tell people that they should keep their talents to themselves. They should be quiet. They should keep still. A burglar had been casing a particular house for some time, and finally he saw the owners leave for what appeared to be an extended camping trip. That night he broke in through the basement window and was trying to find his way in the dark when he heard what seemed to him to be the voice of a very old woman saying, "Shame on you. I see you. And Jesus sees you." Startled, the burglar snarls back, "Shut up, Grandma, or you're going to get hurt." And he shines his flashlight around, but no Grandma is to be found. So again the voice says, "Shame on you. I see you. And Jesus sees you." Finally, the beam of the flashlight finds a large cage, and in it is a pretty upset parrot. Relieved, the burglar turns back around and starts toward the stairs, only to spot an enormous, slobbering Doberman waiting at the top. And just then the parrot screams, "Sicken, Jesus." Shame can be like that big Doberman, waiting to attack us, waiting to sabotage our well-being, and waiting to change our lives in a way that is less than positive, a way that keeps us from realizing who we really are. There's this thing that many Protestant and most Unitarian Universalist ministers go through in their ministerial formation called clinical pastoral education, or CPE. And if you're in a church with a newer minister, you will hear about this experience frequently. The reason for this is because CPE is a significant experience in becoming a minister. And it is an uncomfortable experience. And in some ways, it consistently brings to mind how difficult it is to be human. That's how it was for me. It was, in fact, a jarring experience that seemed determined to question the person I was and the person I hoped to be. Typically, CPE is completed through a hospital setting. I did mine just a few blocks up here from Harris Hospital, Texas Health Resources Fort Worth, as it's known today. And what CPE does, I think, is to help people in ministerial formation get to be better familiar with their own strengths. But more importantly, CPE, I think, allows for the opportunity for aspiring ministers to better understand their own weaknesses. Now, we're often a little hesitant to talk about people who have weaknesses. We'd rather talk about growing edges. We'd rather talk about opportunities grow. And while these euphemisms likely sound better than weaknesses, most who go through the CPE process understand that to be a better minister means confronting their own frailties, their own shortcomings, and their own limitations. The Unitarian Universalist Association requires its fellowship ministers to take one unit, basically one semester of clinical pastoral education, deeming the process not only worthy, but necessary for people to go through in order to become Unitarian Universalist ministers. Believe it or not, I love CPE. In fact, I enrolled in and completed a second unit of clinical pastoral education. Rather than being a reason for terror, as some seminarians believed it to be, I thought it was an awesome experience of learning that I did not want to end, even though it worked more on my shortcomings rather than on praising me as this person who was going into the ministerial profession. The experience was valuable and important, while even at the same time being very difficult. The thing that came up for me again and again, the thing that was most pronounced in my own shortcoming, was my inability to accept vulnerability. Even the recollection of that word, vulnerability, is such that I shudder internally a little bit. The inability to see vulnerability was difficult for me. Not as a condition I chose to accept, but how I really am in the world. And even though I wanted to squash it and leave it be so as not to have it rear its ugly head, as it does so often, I found vulnerability to be very important in being a human being. In CPE, I was told that my desire, actually my need to be right all the time, could very well be problematic in my ministry. And to be quite frank, it is. I came from the academic environment where, as a professor in which my research gave answers to questions, it allowed me to dismiss vulnerability. In the classroom, it was expected of me that when someone asked a question related to my experience or my area of expertise, I was to provide a response that was assumed to be correct. I was expected to be and was the authority in the room who had all the answers. But it really doesn't work like that in real life. And it really doesn't work like that in religion, where one opinion is often deemed to be just as right or correct as the other. And it certainly doesn't work like that in Unitarian Universalism, where there are many correct answers. And there is no examination at the end of the semester to see who is right and who is wrong. We all have good responses, good answers to the questions of life. We all are able to come up with responses that make sense to us and that will help us create a world which answers the questions of meaning and purpose and value. So Brene Brown, who's a researcher at the University of Houston, for more than a decade has been examining these ideas of shame and guilt. And like you would probably guess, her research says these feelings of shame and guilt, though somewhat useful to the community, are troubling to the individual. And I think we can understand that. Early communities in which individuals lived off the work of others were less valued. So if you were a male in a community where you were expected to bring home animals for food and were less than successful, yet still ate the food of successful hunters, there may very well have been a sense of guilt that went along with that. And I think trade unions play on this feeling as well. If you receive the benefits that come from collective bargaining, yet do not pay dues, do not participate, and publicly proclaim your solidarity with others in the trade, the union may remind non-members of their lack of support. In fact, they call them unflattering names, like scabs. And even churches can do the same thing. When people do not financially support the institution, yet receive the benefits that come from belonging to the community, there can be feelings of guilt and shame. But strangely, there are all sorts of reasons why guilt and shame, while painful, can indeed be beneficial to the larger group. So, Brene Brown's research says, what you and I likely already know, that shame and guilt can be the precursor to feelings that eventually deprive us of our humanity. And that deprivation likely comes from the feeling of vulnerability. The idea that we're not good enough. The idea that if others became truly knowledgeable of who we really are, if they came to really know us without the armor that we put up before us, that they don't like what they see. They would not like us for who we really actually are. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is a fear we have that is a fear like no other. Even so, we sometimes are lucky enough to find another who, when we let down our protection, when we take off our armor, and the other learns all there is to know about us, they still choose to love us. It may not be unconditional love, but it is close, and it is good. When you have this, it's something you do not want to let go of. You do not want to surrender. You know it's rare, and that you yearn to hold on to it forever. And what Brene Brown says in her very popular TED Talk and in her book titled Daring Greatly, it is that our capacity to let down our guard, our ability to appear to others in a way that is authentic, our desire to see and be seen as we truly are, that can be profoundly and utterly transformational. It's not easy to do that. It's not natural. In fact, I will, do just about everything we can in order to avoid appearing vulnerable. And yet, if we do, and if the other reciprocates, we are held deeply and almost unconditionally in a way that has the possibility of changing us forever. I are at the beginning of a new year. It's a time where we often decide to take chances, to try something that is different, something that is new, to attempt to be something different. It is sometimes a time where we decide we've already had these unlimited possibilities, and yet even though on January 20th we have already bungled what we have decided to change. I'd just like to encourage you not to give up. The New Year's resolution is somewhat arbitrary, but if we have made one, and it is not yet going the way you want it, this is no time to throw up your hands and wait until next year. It is indeed a time to double down, to attempt to be who you really want to be. I think we're better served. We are more likely to succeed when we are honest with ourselves and honest with each other. When we allow ourselves to be who we really are, to actually be vulnerable, without the guilt and the shame, and to see and be seen as the uniquely individual person who occupies this space and time. To be honest vulnerably. To be like those little girls who dance like nobody's looking and sing like no one can care. That is a gift. To put ourselves out there knowing that there may be repercussions, yet knowing the risk is worth the uncertainty that comes from that courage to do what others will not. And I hope you'll take that chance this year. Because we're all vulnerable. We all have things we wish were different about ourselves, about our lives, about our past. But being here with others who are also vulnerable and who acknowledge it, well, that is truly a blessing. A blessing we can all benefit from. A blessing we can cherish. A blessing we can see in others. And if we allow it, they can see in us. So let's rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn number 113, Where's Our Holy Church? Let's sing the first 3 verses.